Hi friends, Nick coming at you from the beach. We've had a absolutely stellar October so far, where the weather's so good you can't believe it's October. And I often like to just come down here. It's really quiet right now. I think it's the time of day. It's later in the afternoon, so I think most people are picking the kids up from school and getting groceries and all that. So it's a nice little quiet window. I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about anxiety. I know, real light stuff, hey? So many of you who have been in my community for a while know that I have had anxiety since I was, born, essentially. And it is something that I feel really passionate about helping my students with. So that's a very brief preface. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I will tag the people below this when I post it, the podcast. And it's actually a doctor who is apparently local here to Victoria. And I've been following him on Instagram for a while, but I've never heard him talk sort of in depth. And so this podcast interview, I really think if you have anxiety, you need to listen to this podcast interview. I don't want to go on and on about the interview because I will again tag and all that stuff so that you can see it, so you can check it out. But one of the ahas for me as a yoga therapist who helps people with anxiety and has had anxiety her whole life as well, you would think that I would be pretty well informed on anxiety, and I am, but there's always room to grow, of course. But something that he said in the podcast really hit the nail on the head for me as far as explaining why things like yoga and breath work and certain kinds of meditation, not all kinds, are so helpful at helping us with our anxiety. And not in just such a Band-Aid solution way where it's I'm a little calmer now, anyway, on with my life. But in a real sort of lasting way. And it was this podcast that really just kind of, of course, that makes it all make sense. So I didn't know I had anxiety for years. I thought I was just kind of prone to worry because I get stuck in my head a lot. I'm sure none of you can relate, but just in case. So I get stuck in my head a lot, thinking, planning, list writing, obsessing, planning for things that'll probably never happen, figuring out the solutions to those things or lack thereof, you know where it goes. On and on and on, vicious circle. And I'm not going to diss therapy because I actually think therapy is incredibly valuable if you have anxiety. But most cognitive behavioral therapy or kind of talk therapy deals with anxiety in your head. So it deals with the anxious thoughts, which is good. But what if the anxiety actually doesn't start here? What if it starts in your body? So this was the big aha. I always knew that there was a connection between what's happening here in my body because I can feel the physical symptoms of anxiety when it flares up. But I assumed it was the other order. I assumed it was my head is worrying and now my body is talking to me. But what he talks about in this interview, which I thought was so amazing, and why I don't know why I didn't think of this before, is that actually it starts in your body and in your nervous system. And then it becomes the thoughts. So he calls it a sense of alarm. So the sense of alarm actually shows up in your body, and then your mind starts to go as a secondary. And so how just doing talk therapy or just kind of writing in your journal or these types of things tend to be such a temporary kind of Band-Aid solution if you're not dealing with the alarm or the anxiety that's occurring in your body. So amazing to think that it actually starts in your body. And he gives some really good tools in the podcast, which I won't go into because, again, I'm going to tag so you can check the podcast out. But then that got me to thinking, well, of course, that's why yoga, especially therapeutic yoga, because not all yoga is therapeutic. So yoga that is therapeutic and that is specifically designed for your nervous system, for anxiety, is so helpful, in addition to the other things you might choose to do, right? So maybe you go to therapy too. Yes, please do. Therapy's awesome. Yay, therapy. But how, if you're never learning the tools to drop into your body and practice what's called interoception, which is an awareness of what's happening inside of you, then you'll always be missing that anxiety alarm until it gets up here and it becomes this out of control whirling dervish in your head. So therapeutic yoga and meditation help you to practice what's called interoception, which brings you into your body. And then that gives you that skill when you're not practicing yoga. So that hopefully you can start to notice those physical sensations before they turn into a thought storm in your head, and you can deal with just feeling and processing those physical sensations. So this was a game changer aha moment for me, and it might be for you too, to think that actually your anxiety does not start here. It starts in your body, and then it ends up here because this is where we're used to processing things. Most of us are sort of disconnected from our bodies, so we may not notice it in the body until it ends up in our head, and then we may notice some physical sensations. So this was really, really cool. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, so yoga really helps us with interoception. It helps us learn to drop into our body, to see what we're feeling, to experience it. And then it gives us tools to help to support calming our nervous system when these alarms go off. And these tools are specific physical postures, and they're not the common ones that you think of when you think of yoga, like sun salutations and all that stuff. But there's a few very physical postures which are really good for the nervous system, as well as pranayama, breath work. That's really, really good. There's several techniques that are great for anxiety, and there's no one size fits everybody. Some of the ones, for example, that are commonly recommended are like the worst in the world for me. It's like the worst one, but that really works great for other people. So there's several different breath techniques that can also help to stimulate that parasympathetic, that relaxation response. And again, you're not likely going to find these in just your average drop-in yoga class. This is deeper work than that. It's more therapeutic. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that herbal medicine has a very similar effect. So I'll tell you a little story. Stories by the sea. Here we go. When I was in a time of really heightened anxiety, like we're talking really, really crippling anxiety, to the point where I was experiencing physical symptoms like my hands tingling and I was disassociating, and it was like quite bad. And I was in school at the time, so I don't even know how I got through that first semester of school, but somehow we managed. And I was in a workshop at Pacific Rim called Natural Emergency Medicine, I believe it was called. And so we had different things each day. And so this was the day with the herbalist. And the herbalist who was teaching this his name is Sean Donahue. He's incredibly gifted. And so he was passing around little herbal tinctures, and he got us to put a couple drops on our hand and then just kind of like lick it off our hand, take a moment, close our eyes, go inward, and see what we felt. And of course, there's no right answer because not every herb works for every person in the same way. So it's very individualized. Of course, certain ones have certain properties, but some are better for other people than others, just based on our constitution. So he was passing some herbs around. The first one was cayenne, so it was pretty clear. It was like, whew, some people loved it, some people didn't. And then he passed around an herb, and I took like literally a couple drops on my hand, a little lick, sat and closed my eyes, And all of the sudden, that crazy phonetic anxiety that was like buzzy and overstimulated, and my hands were tingling, and I was like, racing heart, all of that stuff that was happening went whoo, and I went way down in my body. And I actually felt all of that drop, and I felt my connection to my pelvis and my ground. And I hadn't felt that way in weeks. I felt like myself when I'm not anxious. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, that was 2 little drops. Could have that kind of an effect on my nervous system. So needless to say, I immediately booked a clinic with this gentleman and told him about my experience. And he created an herbal tincture for me. Which I use anytime that I'm feeling sort of in that SOS state, because it does bring me immediately back into my body. I get out of my head, out of this sort of phonetic energy, and it pulls me back in and down, which then gives me just enough relief that I can deal with my anxiety in a skillful way. So both therapeutic yoga and herbal medicine are really good tools for anxiety because they start with the body connection and the nervous system connection. It's not up here, it's in here, in your body. Once you can get your nervous system regulated, then it's much easier to look objectively at your anxious thoughts and to deal with those, whether they're true or not. But you can't deal with them when you're being so stimulated from your body up to your head, then they're just going in a circle. So this was a huge aha for me. I always knew, of course, about the nervous system response and how key that is to helping us with our anxiety, nourishing of the nervous system, that being able to drop into our parasympathetic nervous system. This is not news to me. But what was unique about this information and really rings true for me is that actually the alarm, he calls it, or I'll just call it anxiety since that's the word that we all know. The anxiety actually starts in your body and then becomes the thoughts. And if we can learn some tools and some techniques to bring that awareness to it when it's still in the body, then it doesn't get out of control and it doesn't get up in our thoughts. And then the head doesn't start adding to it. So, pretty powerful, simple, but incredibly powerful idea. Super amazing. Again, I will tag both the host of the podcast and the guest below so that you can check out the podcast episode. And I highly recommend that you check it out if you have anxiety, or if you have a loved one with anxiety, send it to them. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, about how the sense of alarm or anxiety in the body, if it isn't nurtured, loved, grounded, then it moves up into our head, and then our head starts to spin out of control, which then makes the body even more anxious. You can see where I'm going with this. So I will share that podcast below. Also, if you need support in this area, I have coming up in November a therapeutic yoga and herbal medicine for anxious times workshop, where I am teaming up with my dear friend and colleague, Alexis. And it'll be a little bit of talking about herbal medicine and how herbal medicine works with the body and those alarm signals. And then we will do a beautiful therapeutic yoga practice designed to cultivate that sense of nourishment in our nervous system, that interoception, again, that being aware of what is happening inside of us so that we can choose tools to skillfully deal with it. And the therapeutic yoga will include breath work and gentle practices for our body. Very gentle, very therapeutic. Often not the yoga you think of when you think of yoga. So therapeutic yoga is quite different. And then we will finish that part with a practice called Yoga Nidra. And if you've never experienced Yoga Nidra, it's kind of hard to explain. But I always say it's sort of like if a guided meditation or guided relaxation and a meditation had a baby, that would be Yoga Nidra. So that's where you lay down, and I'll walk you through an experience with my voice, which includes a body scan, again, to cultivate that interoception. This is a skill we can learn. This is a tool that we can learn how to drop into our body and notice things so that we can then deal with them before they become the raging bushfire. So if that sounds good to you, I would love for you to join. The link I will either put below this video if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or somewhere. If you're watching this on Instagram, the link is in my bio. The workshop is offered on a sliding scale and it's on Zoom. So regardless of where you live, you can still sign up, because if your time zone doesn't work for you, you'll get the recording for 7 days to be able to practice. And you don't need a bunch of fancy yoga equipment if you've never done yoga on Zoom before. If you can just grab some blankets and books and pillows, we'll be good to go. Maybe a bathrobe tie. That's all we need. So if you have also been listening to this and had a, oh my God, aha, it starts in the body moment, I would encourage you to check out that podcast. Again, I'm going to tag below, and to check out the upcoming workshop, Yoga and Herbal Medicine for Anxious Times, where you can learn a bit more about how herbal medicine and our therapeutic yoga tools can help to cultivate this interoception and give you tools and techniques that you can use when you start feeling the anxiety coming up in your body before it gets up here and gets out of control. All right, my friends, I hope that you find that helpful. Here's one more shot of the beach. I hope you have a beautiful day. If you have questions, just drop them below.